As you all know, those of you, how many of you lived in the community for more than 20 years? I'll bet a lot of you have, yeah. So most of you have. So you know we did a petition audit in 1995. We audited again by petition in 2000. A petition audit is, in my mind, one of the best things that can happen in Missouri. It's one of the only times where you have true representative democracy. Usually you operate through your state representative or your state senator. Here's a chance for the people themselves to say we want something done. You get the right number of signatures. In this case, you had to get 15% of the people who voted in the last governor's election. That would have been 1,831 people from Pine Lawn voted in the last governor's election. Do the math, you needed 275 signatures to get the state auditor to come in and do an audit. You received 284 valid signatures we received, so we came in and did the audit. And I like petition audits. You know, there's lots of them that I have to do by law, and then there's some I do when people want me to do them, and that's what this one was. And these are very important to me because it's the citizens themselves who asked for the audit and followed the laws to get that audit. So we did the audit in 1995, another one in 2000. That was also a petition audit. We made 37 recommendations. When we came back for yet another petition audit in 2006, only 6 of the recommendations had been fully implemented, 6 had been partially implemented, and 21 were not implemented. The rest were not applicable. So we've had some problems here before, I got to be frank, with getting audit recommendations implemented. In 2006, we did a petition audit and made 29 specific recommendations for how to improve the city. The good news is 13 of those were fully implemented, and you know, we view that as progress. While I can't say this audit we're delivering today is a good one, there has been some progress made on some of the issues. It is certainly better than it used to be, and that's something you all should be pleased about, that there's at least a positive direction going on here in the city. A lot more to do, and we'll talk about that. I'm by no means giving the city a clean bill of health, but we have seen progress since the last audit, and I wanted to make that point, that we did see improvement in several areas. The period that we audited this time, and this is the normal way we do the petition. If we audited way back 10, 15 years, it would take forever. We normally focus on the last fiscal year. So we focused on the fiscal year that ended June 30th, 2010, which is the normal way we do this. But when an issue was relevant and went back a few years, we didn't ignore it. We also, if it was relevant in the last year, but it had some issues that predated the last year, we looked into those too. That's the normal way that we audited things. We also try to be efficient in our use of resources. So since we were here auditing the city, we also audited the court, the municipal court at the same time. And very briefly, that's a separate audit you can find on our website. We did find some problems on accounting controls, accounting for traffic tickets, and computer access controls, but I won't focus on that today. That's a separate audit that we did in conjunction with this. We audited the court as well. Now this audit involves a lot of effort. You know, when we get a petition audit, we really dig in. Over 1,700 hours were spent in this audit by our auditors, really looking into details about what was going on in the city. As you know, the city has to pay for the audit. We estimated the cost would be $25,000 to $35,000, but we asked that, or $35,000 to $50,000. But we asked everybody to be efficient, and the charge to the city will be $26,000. It will be less than what we estimated, even though we put in 1,700 hours. It's still a lot of money for the city, but I think when you see the recommendations we make, we're hopeful that the city will be able to save much more than $26,000, and that this audit will have been worth the time and effort for all of you. I wanted to mention that we looked at every concern that was raised. We looked at and analyzed every concern raised by the petitioners in this case. You will see that some of them that you all raised are not addressed in the audit. That doesn't mean we didn't look at it. It means that we were unable to find any problem or any issue that was worth mentioning in the audit. Now, you may disagree, and that's what we have our dialogue about, but these people look at things pretty thoroughly, and there were a few things that were raised that you won't see mentioned in the audit because we were unable to find any evidence of a problem in that area. Another thing I wanted to point out is that you know, when we do petition audits, we get varying reactions from the people. I've already delivered a number of these, and we get varying reactions from the city. Sometimes they're very defensive and negative, and sometimes they're really interested in cooperating. I do want to say that even though we found a lot of improvements that need to be made here in Pine Lawn, we found that the Board of Aldermen, the mayor, and the city administrator have been very cooperative, and they've agreed to implement all of the recommendations that we suggested. And that's a step in the right direction also. A lot of problems, but at least there's no resistance. Now, how do I follow up? Do we have to wait another 5 years? Some of you may have read that as soon as I got here, the first thing I did was something that's never been done, was I implemented an audit follow-up team. I took the former prosecutor of Greene County down in Springfield, and he'll come back and he'll make sure we don't have to wait 5 years to see progress. A lot of the commitments that were made by the city were made to improve these things within 90 days. And so our audit follow-up team, one or two of our auditors along with a former prosecutor will come in and really analyze whether the city is making the progress they promised to make. So we're looking to get results quickly. We're not looking to wait another 5 years for these results. We're looking for these results to be in 60 or 90 or 120 days, not 4 or 5 or 6 years. And we will send a follow-up team in to make sure that those changes that everybody's agreed to, these aren't controversial changes, these are changes everybody's agreed to, we'll make sure that they are done quickly. And that's part of my commitment to you. We do think that there are a lot of improvements that need to be made, and yet we still feel there have been some significant improvements since the last time we were here. Let me go through the findings one by one. I'm not going to go into kind of detail in the audit. As I said, we have a Facebook page and time for questions. But the first thing we look at always when we do a petition audit is the overall financial condition of the city, county, or entity that we're looking at. We found that the general fund and the trash fund here in Pine Lawn are not in good financial condition. They're in poor financial condition, mainly because the rates that are charged for the tax and for the trash fund are not sufficient to cover the cost. Right now, you've got a $1.4 million delinquent trash fund. Now, you're talking about a city where the annual general budget is what, $2.93 million, $3 million, and you got $1.4 million in delinquent trash. That's half the annual budget. So this is something that, I mean, this creates a huge drag on the city when you've got delinquencies that are that big and they need to be pursued. There's been money transferred from the general fund to the trash fund to help cover shortages. That's perfectly legal to do that. There's nothing improper about transfer. Some people are concerned about that. But you can transfer, that's what you do from the general fund to the trash fund to cover the shortages, but they've been lots of money. And from August of 2006 until June of 2008, $93,000 was transferred over from the general fund to the trash fund. That's a lot of money in a city this small. From July of 2008 through June of 2009, $97,000 was transferred from the general fund to the trash fund because people aren't paying their bills. Then when we go from July of 2009 up to June of 2010, it jumps to $166,000 transferred from the general fund to the trash fund. That's a lot of money to cover that shortfall. And again, in the last fiscal year, it was $160,000. The total amount that's been transferred over there now is $425,000 because people aren't paying their bills. Everybody else, that means everybody else who is paying their taxes and contributing to the city has to pay for the people who aren't, and it's up to, it's approaching $500,000. That is a serious problem. A related problem is that in order to get the general fund in back, so you're transferring money from the general fund to the trash fund, which is legal. In order to, then the general fund is out of money. And so money's been transferred into the general fund from the capital improvement fund from 2006 and 2007 to cover this problem. That is actually not legal under Missouri law because that's dedicated fund for the capital improvements and transferred over. Now I will tell you that interest has been paid on that money that's been borrowed when it comes back, and that's good in the sense that we see a lot of situations around the state where money's taken from one fund and they don't even pay interest. Sometimes they don't even pay it back. So we commend the city for entering into a loan agreement, paying interest back on that, but actually if you really look at Missouri statutes, that's not allowed under Missouri law. So we appreciate the good faith in which this effort was taken, but it has to be corrected because it's not permissible under Missouri law to take dedicated funds and move them over to a general fund. It's okay to move from a general fund to a specific fund, but not from a specific fund back to the general fund, and that's what's being happened. In biblical terms, it's really robbing Peter to pay Paul, and you're not allowed to do that. And so we've got to be very careful about that going forward. We were concerned also that this problem has been festering for many years of borrowing back and forth between funds to try to keep things going, all to make up for people who are not paying their bills, is really what it amounts to. You all who are paying your bills are paying for the people who aren't paying their bills. And we want the Board of Aldermen to develop a much more specific plan for how we're going to increase the receipts and decrease the disbursements so you can have a balanced budget and the city can go on and be healthy.